Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is an author, an ultra marathon runner. He's a diehard Yankee fan and the co-founder of the Intro Machine, helping you become a master of introductions and relationships. Please welcome Joe Templin.
Morning,
Welcome,
Mike.
Joe.
It's good to be here finally.
I'm glad you're finally here. As we talked about a little bit in pre-show, you were the actual first to fill out my intake form for this show.
So I'm number one. As Dr. Seuss said, you can't be number one unless you're odd.
You are number, unless you're odd. That's right. That's funny. You are number one, and due to scheduling conflicts, of course, we weren't able to get you in. But I am so happy you're in. There's a lot of things that we share in common, and that I want to kind of just start unfolding with you and start getting into. But first, let's talk about something that's like hot off the press, that is top of mind.
Yep.
You got it right in front of me here. You are an author, and you just finished one of your books because you've written many before. And this book is called Everyday Excellence. And you did a book signing not too long ago, right?
Yep, I did one the
Boston
other night
Spa?
in Boston Spa for Cub Scouts. We've got one coming up to do as support for Autism Society, actually.
Okay.
And hopefully I get to go on the road and talk to people and sign books and have a good old time.
Well, you are on the road today, right?
I know.
This is on the road.
It was, and it's a beautiful drive down. Beautiful drive.
So tell me about this book, because I know you've been listening to the show. You know a lot about the show and how we try to help entrepreneurs and business leaders be able to be their best self and get past any of their limiting beliefs and be able to find different ways to be able to be successful and achieve their dreams, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to do, is achieve our dreams. And so this book, I think, is almost like a roadmap to being able to do that annually. And you bring in a lot of really great quotes from different brilliant people, brilliant minds.
Smarter than us.
Thich Nhat Hanh is in there, Eleanor Roosevelt, so many others. So why don't we jump into the book, and then from there, I'm sure we'll uncover some things about you and your life and your experiences and what brought you to this point. But I'm really excited to get into this book, so I'd like to talk a little bit about this first.
Awesome.
Are you cool with that?
Absolutely.
All
my
right.
friend.
So why don't we start with what inspired you to write this book?
So I was talking with my friend Eric, who's an attorney, and he was talking about, okay, Joe, you've done financial planning and helped a lot of people there. Then you've done training, you've written stuff. But, in a lot of ways, you're just like a guru. Can you run my life for me? I'm like, sure, whatever. Okay. And I'm actually trying to help him out in a lot of ways with that. But as entrepreneurs, we are literally juggling a dozen balls, and it's not even balls. They're like flaming chainsaws while we're on a unicycle, and people are throwing road flares at us. It is just absolute chaos, and we just try and minimize it and impose some order at various points and build something that can hopefully be sustainable and successful. So this is the world that we deal with, and it's very much like parenthood in a lot of ways too, because kids are born and we're like, oh my God, we're not ready for this. And the truth is, we are rarely ready for what life presents to us. And so the best way to get ready is to become more resilient, to become more independent, to become more self-reliant and confident. And this is something that the Stoics talk about in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of Stoic influences throughout this book. But what I wanted to do was to help individuals slowly get better in multiple ways. So I talk about skill set and will set very often in terms of working with entrepreneurs and financial advisors. And so what this book is designed to do is to allow people to slowly build their will set by understanding themselves and the world around them and getting a little bit better, growing a little bit each day. And it's designed so that they can go through it for the year and then recycle back through it. Because as the old Stoic saying says, no man can walk through the same river twice because the river's different and you're different. But if we can continuously grow, imagine if you get just slightly better every single day, how awesome you're going to be in 6 months, a year, 10 years. And it is this continuous growth mindset, Kaizen in a lot of ways, that allows individuals to achieve awesomeness and be able to serve their communities in a much higher capacity.
Wow. I mean, this book's exactly what this show's about. It's like this show and this book goes hand in hand. And you did speak a little bit about that in the intro to the book, about that you don't want it to just be a coffee table book. You want it to be a book that is something that you use every day. And even in the book, I noticed you have some worksheet pages in there as well that the person buying the book or using the book, as I said, using the book can like write notes and everything. Right.
So like Robert Greene's about to come out with a book based on his 48 Laws of Power and a bunch of the other ones. And Ryan Holiday has a book, The Daily Stoic, where every single day they're giving you a quote and a concept. They tend to be very focused. Mine tends to be much more wide ranging because of my ADHD and my varied experiences. But there's also a call to action, an action item each day that should take anywhere between 30 seconds and 3 minutes total. But it is action that makes us better. Words are weak, actions are powerful is a phrase that I use sometimes. And so if you do those little things after a day, week, month, year, you have improved yourself in a lot of different capacities.
Ryan Holiday and the Daily Stoic, I was put on to the Daily Stoic about a year ago by a fellow Toastmaster. Shout out to Diane Miller. She sent me over some clips of Ryan Holiday and the Daily Stoic. And there's so much that we can learn about the Stoics and Stoicism. You hear the word somebody was Stoic, right? And you never really understand it until you start learning about the Stoics and learning about like Marcus Aurelius and everything that they went through. And I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, reading some things about Marcus Aurelius. They went through a pandemic, and he actually ended up dying because of the pandemic, the flu that was going around at the time, because he was going out. This was really an incredible story about leadership. I know I'm getting a little bit off for a second, but because we're on this, while we're on this for a second here, what I read about him, and you obviously are very knowledgeable at the Stoics, so please fact check me on this, but basically, there was a flu-like illness going around, pandemic going around at the time, and they would wear masks and cover their faces and everything. But Marcus Aurelius was a leader that had to be in front of the people and with the people. And while he was being advised to stay indoors and to stay away from everybody, he just couldn't do that. He needed to be there.
Right. And I mean, most of the Roman elite fled the city. They went out to their reservations or whatever to escape. And he said, I need to be here to lead my people.
That's right.
And he was out among them, and he brought in the best doctors, Gallion and all these others. There was a financial crisis. He literally sold the palace furnishings to raise money to help offset the debt of the city and the empire. So this is leadership in action. And so Ryan Holiday analyzes this and discusses it, and that was one of the great influences on it. And then we can look at some of the more modern Stoics, like Stockdale. The Stockdale paradox is something that I've embraced for years. Life sucks, but we can get through it. If we have a plan, we can succeed. We can ultimately have hope. Okay, James Mattis, General Chaos, he hates being called Mad Dog, supposedly, is one of these other ones where you have to learn from history. You have to learn from what happened in the past. You have to think. You have to learn from others, and that allows us to be better for the future. So these are all influences that I've poured into my weird brain, and the book is basically what has been extracted from that based on my experiences, but also where I am today.
Yeah, and you pull up all of these names, and so I think what I'm getting at too in the story of Marcus Aurelius here is that we, as a society, as just people walking around, just listening to these different great quotes and affirmations and seeing them on social media or whatever, a great quote, right? You're thinking, you see this person's name, you see this quote, and you go, but they don't know what I'm experiencing. They don't know what I'm going through. And in this story, when I read it last year, I was like, well, wait a second. He lived it. He is experiencing a pandemic. And what's really important is that, we hear these great Stoic quotes, and we wonder, like you said, like a river, isn't the same as standing. And we're like, okay, great. I'm glad you philosophized about this and thought about this so much, but you don't know what I'm feeling. And And they really do. So it's very important, I think, to break down the history of people and understand where these quotes really came from. It could have just been an everyday conversation that he said something like this, and then they're like, wait a second, we got to write that one down. This is good stuff.
So hopefully they record it like this.
Right.
Okay. But, podcasts can do the same. I've written, I took multiple quotes from podcasts that led to discussion. And with quotes, people hear the quote and they're like, oh, that's nice. It's a soundbite.
Right.
But what the book does is then we have anywhere from a couple of paragraphs to a couple of pages of analysis around that going into lots of different dimensions, whether it's business, whether it's personal, relationships, physical health, mental health, all these different components where that quote influences and we get some insight from.
Right.
And so I could have thrown together just a book of quotes, and it might have been interesting.
First of all, it certainly is not a book of quotes from what I read.
No. We've got lots of quotes, but they're all meant to help uncover within the individual certain weaknesses so they can be addressed, certain strengths, passions, all these different components that we can turn around and help people become the best version of themselves. Everybody is really like a diamond.
Right.
And they've got these different facets. Diamonds are created under pressure, and diamonds need to be polished to allow their true beauty to come on out. And so every single one of us is a gem in some capacity. How are we looking at it, under what light, what facet, to truly let it shine? And that is what I'm trying to do with this book, is to bring that out for other people so that they can be the best them possible.
I would correct you and say that is what you're doing with this book, not trying, because you're accomplishing that goal.
You're gonna make me blush.
No, well, but so part of why I'm bringing this topic up of listening to someone's soundbite, listening to someone's quote, and not understanding that they've walked a day in your shoes, right? Is I'm relating it to your story too, and some of the experiences that you've had throughout your life to get you to where you are today. Because many people that might be listening going, all right, he wrote a book, but what does that mean, right? Like, what did he have to do to write this book? He's an author. Of course he wrote a book, right? But from what I've read about you, you've overcome a lot of challenges to be able to get to where you are. So there's a couple things that I'm interested in.
Sure.
One, of course, how long did it take you to write this book?
So can I tell a side story that might illustrate this?
You can, but I just want to set this up for everybody.
Okay.
Is I want people to know that what we're going to talk about is how long it took you to get to this book, but also some of the challenges that you overcame to be able to get here. So you mentioned ADHD a couple times, and there's so many entrepreneurs and business leaders out there that suffer or have overcome or work with ADHD. And so I'd love for you to also share that experience and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Let me make a note.
Oh, I got it in my notes. Don't you worry. You share that story now.
See?
Go ahead.
Notes. I learned to do this as a pledge when I was 18 years old. So the story, Pablo Picasso, the great artist, was sitting in a cafe, and being Picasso, he was, having his coffee or wherever, and he was just doodling. And he was just doodling, observing all that. And he finishes his coffee and he gets up to leave. And he crunches up the napkin and he's going to throw it out. LA comes up to him, Picasso, can I have that drawing? Because he's just going to throw it away. And he's like, sure, $25,000. And she's like, but it only took you a couple of minutes to do it. He's like, no, ma'am, it took me a lifetime to do that doodle. So this book, has taken me a lifetime to write and learn and do. The crystallization around it actually happened like this when I was listening to Ryan Holiday actually I was listening to Jocko Willink and some Black Sabbath at the same time when I was working out. And then sitting down and doing it, it took about 1,000 hours in 6 months. So I literally would sit down and write every single day for half hour, 45 minutes. I'd get up, read my daily Stoic, have my cup of coffee, do my workout, sit down, and as Hemingway said, just bleed on the page, and then go and work all day, at my regular entrepreneurial type ventures, write some throughout the day if I had some ideas, write again at night, and just repeat, and get through the grind like that. And that's how we ended up creating all 366 days of the book.
I'm very interested in more of the building and creation of this book because I'm in the process right now of writing my own book. And it's my very first book. It's something, it's been a lifelong dream for me. And so again, for our entrepreneurs and business leaders listening, we have these dreams inside of us from very young ages, and we want them to come true, but we don't know how, right? And I think you said it before, which was action in each day. Yep. And I think that action can start with just verbalizing it, just verbalizing to someone, hey, I want to write a book. And that's how it started for me. Was I just started saying it out loud, like, I want to write a book. And I kept saying, I want to write a book. And remember when I made that correction for you of trying, it's the same thing of I want to write a book to I'm writing a book. Yep. And changing that thought process. And then I hired a coach who's also a personal friend, Matt Alfonso, where we started working on time blocking for this book. Mm-hmm. And we started working on this being a goal that I'm going to start writing this book. And very similar to you, what I do now is about 4 days a week. I'm not as disciplined as you with this writing of the book. I wake up, like you said, have my cup of coffee, I think, meditate on it a little bit, and then start writing. And typically it's anywhere from 5 or 20 minutes, depending on what kind of flow. And then I get interrupted. I have young children. But just going back to this, to you writing your book and putting these 1,000 hours into it, did you use time blocking? I know you just mentioned kind of like a little bit of a routine, but what were some of the techniques or strategies that you used in order to make sure that you wrote a little bit every day in these 1,000 hours? One
of the things I did is I am hyper disciplined because I have to be, because I have so much chaos in my life and my brain has like 55,000 things going on simultaneously. Plus I have my kids and I'm going through the divorce and all these other things. So I have to be incredibly disciplined. And so I adopted something that James Clear talks about in Habit Stack, in his book, Atomic Habits, called habit stacking, where, I would get up in the morning anyway, grab my cup of coffee and read my daily Stoic, and then I would work out. Okay, so that's my habit every morning. So what I did is I just put another habit on top of it. When I got done working out, I would sit down and start writing until either the timer went off because I had other stuff that I had to do using the Pomodoro method, or I exhausted what was in my brain. And so I did it every single day. And I have a concept that I talk about with financial advisors that I coach is no goose eggs. Is you can't put up a zero for the day. If you are operating on some sort of point system or metrics, you cannot have a single day where you don't achieve something. Might not be the best day in the world, but you know what? If you have to get 5 introductions every single day on average, get a couple. Okay, so that there's no zero on your scorecard for that day. If you need to work out every single day, you get up, and even if you just walk for 10 minutes, that's better than sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. Okay, so no goose eggs, doing something a little bit every single day so that you make that continuous progress. And that was something that I adopted. And there were some days that did not go well. Right. I mean, I injured my back a couple of months ago and literally could not get out of bed. I've had some other stuff going on that just completely disrupted it. But it's those days when you don't feel like doing it, when you suck it up and go and you just do what you need to do, whether you feel like it or not. Those are the days that make you stronger so that when you are on a roll, you can just keep going. And so it's in the darkness is when champions are made, as Ali would say.
It's funny, when you came into the studio today, you said to me, hey, I got a funny story to share with you. And it just speaks to everything you just said right there, is that just finding the positive in everything and just powering through things, through any adversity or negativity. And you with a big smile, and you have a big smile on now, you got a funny story to share with me, and it's because you bumped your head on something, fell in some mulch, spilled some coffee on your new suit and everything, and you're still here with a big smile on your face and happy. And I think it's because you really understand that there's always positivity in everything that we do. And you said it to me too. You were like, the day's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, it's like, I have a theory, eat your frog early. So, if there's something that you hate, like picking up the phone to call new potential appointments, which I hate beyond belief. I still shake. I'm incredible at it because I decided to minimize my time doing it by becoming great. And I still, get the shakes and would do almost anything to avoid that, but I do it. Okay, eat the frog in the morning and your day gets better. And that's a theory that I apply. So if you hate working out, get it done. Get it done early. Get over it, and then you get to be in the bonus round. You get to enjoy the entire rest of the day. You get to do the fun stuff. Eat the liver, then you have dessert.
And there are strategies around that too, about what you're saying there of eat the frog, which we all understand, which is pretty much like do what you hate first, right? Get it out of the way. I think that there are strategies around it. I mean, while we're staying on the business side of things in terms of cold calling or calling prospects or potential clients, like you just said, and whether you're an entrepreneur or a business leader, and I always identify business leaders as being people that work in the corporate world, climbing up the C-suite ladder. There's always going to be a time where you're going to have to call people that don't want to receive your call.
Nope.
And so you have to find a way to make it enjoyable for you. And sometimes it's never going to be, right? We understand that. There's going to be the circumstances that aren't. But I think that if we can share any light on this, that you probably advise your financial advisors on with this, and that I would share with anybody on my team, would just be try to call on the people first, or try to put a list together of the people that you actually want to call, right? Mm-hmm. Start working through that. Start building some momentum. I mean, you know this in habits, right? It's all about momentum. And if you could build up that momentum and find your voice in calling these people that you actually want to speak to and that you actually want to hear their response to, even if it's a bad response, right? If you're selling a product and somebody's willing to speak to you and share with you why they don't like that product, well, you just got some data.
Yeah.
And now you can use that data in your next phone call and say, hey, look, I know that we don't do this really great, but here's what we do really great, right?
Exactly. And one of the things is make a game out of it. Okay?
Gamify it, yes.
Focus on how many no's can you get. Use your countdowns. Keep the score. I work with a company called Sales Activity Management, which actually works with financial advisors on tracking their numbers and how they can improve. And I started using their product in 1995 when I first entered financial services. And if it were not for that understanding of keeping the score, I would not have had the success that I did. I mean, made $1 million roundtable multiple times. I've done $1 million of premium in a single year in the past. I'll do it again, but it's a game. Okay. Well, it's an absolute game.
So let's stay on the game for a second here, because you're a diehard Yankee fan, right? Yeah. And when we just think about this, so I'm not a baseball fan as much as I'm a basketball fan, right? But all the same, right? It doesn't matter what sport you watch. Just think of a moment when you're watching on TV, and you're watching the game, and then also if you're in the stadium, right? What's always in front of us in the bottom right corner or right in the center?
The score. Always.
And the time clock.
What?
And I mean, there's so many. I was talking to somebody, a salesperson actually. We're working on a platform together, and he's in his 20s. And we were just talking, and he said, "Yeah, I'm too young." We were talking about leadership roles and things like that, because that's where I end up going with somebody, even if they're trying to sell me something, right? And he said, "Yeah, but I'm too young." He kind of like gave me that vibe of like, I'm too young. And I looked at him and I said, he's 29 years old, right? And I said, LeBron James, led his team to the finals in his mid-20s, right? Would anybody in the NBA have told LeBron James he's not a leader in his 20s? Absolutely not. They'd be crazy. They'd be fired, right? They'd be fired. But for some reason, we don't translate that athlete mentality into the business world, when meanwhile, they're almost the same, right?
They are. Jack Stack wrote a book, The Great Game of Business, to teach people about understanding the score and how to get better. And if you look at it as a game, you're going to miss a couple of shots. Michael Jordan missed 9,000 plus shots in his career, and he missed multiple game-winning shots. And he'd take them all again. He can tell you exactly the scenario of every one of those game-winning shots that he missed, and he'd still take the shot again, because he knows that's what it takes to win. You fail so that you can win. You learn from losing so that you can win more often. You learn to hate losing so much that you're going to do what it takes to be better and you can win. Okay? There's a saying that I have, game time is not practice time. Or to quote Allen Iverson from your birthday in the book, practice? We talking about practice? Yeah. For a young person within their career, how much time are they spending practicing their craft? Okay? I have a friend who played professional hockey, and he was the Hobie Baker Award winner in college and everything. Shout out to you, Bill Watson. And he used to talk about how much time they would spend in practice for a couple of minutes on the ice. So that's one of the things that I don't care what you're selling, how often do you practice your language? How often do you practice your mindset? How often are you running calculations so you understand all the potential variables, so if the puck bounces in a different direction, you're still good? Okay? Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, the victorious general is he who has made 1,000 calculations in his castle ere marching out to battle. Salespeople don't make these calculations and understand all the variables so that they have that intuitive knowledge for when they go on out. They haven't practiced to the point where it is reactive. As a martial artist, every single morning, I throw at least 100 punches each hand. I have thrown probably 10 million punches with each hand in my life. I don't have to think about it. I just do it. I have had situations where I'm talking with people, training them in sales, and my mouth just opens and stuff comes from my deep, dark unconscious that is incredible. So they're like, oh, what'd you just say? Let me write that down. I'm like, I don't even remember. That's great that we're recording this, because when you reach the point of tremendous experience and wisdom in your craft, true mastery, you don't even need to think, you just do. But then that master still goes back and practices the fundamentals every single day. My old cello teacher, Herr Doblin, who died multiple years ago, said, I asked him, why do you practice every day? He said, if I don't practice one day in a row, I notice. If I don't practice 2 days in a row, the critics notice. If I don't practice 3 days in a row, the public notices. Okay, so that's the standard of excellence that can drive entrepreneurs, that can drive salespeople, that can drive anybody to having a higher level of productivity and happiness. Because one of the things about being happy is mastery is a component of it. Pursuing a worthwhile, great goal, where it's running the marathon, getting your black belt, making $1 million round table, making your company sales leaders, whatever it is, losing a certain amount of weight. Having a goal and consistently working towards it is going to be something that creates that feedback loop that brings joy and happiness overall.
And I think that applies to everyone. That applies to every individual, whether you are an entrepreneur or not, right? So obviously that's advice that we can take. Something else that I think it applies to is what you spoke about earlier on, which is ADHD, right? So some people wonder, how do I overcome this? How, I have dyslexia. So, and I wonder, I see sometimes when I read with my 6-year-old daughter, Denise, I notice sometimes that she reads words backwards. And I don't know if it's just a learning thing at her age, but that's how it was for me and still is. I'll end up seeing things just differently. But what I learned, and what I think you can share with us about what you've been able to do to be so successful, and that's why I say overcome it, because you never really, it never leaves you, right? It's still with you, but you start building out habits, which is what we're talking about. You start practicing, you start doing things that, like you said, it becomes just unconscious. And so I'd like to just go backwards here for a second. Now, we dove into the book from the beginning because this is just too exciting to not jump in on. I mean, it's not every day I have a guest that just puts a book down in front of me after coming from a book signing. So this is really exciting for me to have you in studio. But I do want to take a step back on some of the challenges that you overcame in your life. And in your bio, you wrote, I died at 10 years old. And when I asked you about this off mic, you said, that's why I am the way I am today. So I'd like to just bring us back there.
Sure.
And you share that story with us about that challenge that you overcame and to bring you to where you're writing a book at a book signing, man. I mean, this is awesome.
So I was severely asthmatic as a kid, and growing up in the 70s, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and everyone wore plaid pants, according to my kids, growing up back then, we didn't have the puffers and the nebulizers. We had literal oxygen tents in the hospital that we had to be in. And so I missed over half my year in second grade, and they were going to fail me until the standardized exams came back and I got a perfect score. And they're like, oh, I guess we have to pass them. But that's part of the reason why my handwriting still sucks. My 10-year-old is better than mine. But so I was 10 years old, and my mom, God rest her soul, had me at Dr. Murray's office. I was having a massive asthma attack. And literally, I died right there. I mean, my mom's like, he turned into an octopus. You'd never believe how many arms he had. I, floated on up and looking down. There was all the lights and all that, and big deep voice. Oh, not ready yet. Boom, came back down. And so that's part of the reason why I burn the candle at both ends and in the middle, because I've been given a second chance at this, and so I'm not going to waste it. So that's one of the reasons why. I don't take BS from people, that I don't sit around watching TV. I multitask wherever possible. So I'll be driving and listening to stuff, or I'll have a podcast going that I'm listening to while I'm listening to
the Michael
music.
Esposito Show, of course.
Of course. That's one of the many ones that we mix on in, because you need a whole variety of sources, because I want to experience all of it, because I've got a chance to now, so, and also it's part of what helped make me so driven. Also, second son syndrome in a lot of ways, but, I run ultra marathons. There was a point where I couldn't even walk across the room because of my asthma. I've been a world champion martial artist coming from the days when I was this skinny, scrawny kid. And this is exactly the sort of approach that Teddy Roosevelt had. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt had a brilliant mind, but was asthmatic, and his doctor actually prescribed whiskey and cigars for him, which they don't do anymore. Goodness. But, his father's like, Theodore, you have the brain, but you do not have the body to go with it. And look at what Teddy Roosevelt became from applying his will and putting it on his body. So if I can do it, anybody else can do it.
Yeah.
So I use exercise partially as a way to process information. I mean, I start running and then I have to stop and write notes down because of everything coming out of my brain. But I use that as also a way to help manage my ADHD, and I build structures around it, because I can't just flap my arms and fly to, California or to Ottawa. We can't do that. We're human. Mm-hmm. So what do? We build airplanes. So if we have a limitation, we should use our brains, our technology, our tools to build things around us to allow us to have success. And that's one of the things that we do with entrepreneurs in a lot of ways is, okay, what are your habits? What tools are you using? How are you automating stuff? How are you building these things? What is your staffing? Hire staff that complements you so that they do the things that you suck at. Okay? Because we have different mindsets. I am not good at paperwork. I'm not allowed to touch paperwork. Okay? Because I will mess it up. My staff does that. But we build these things around us to allow us to have maximum performance. And I found staff that love doing those sort of things. So they are living their best life because they're doing stuff that they enjoy, and they know that they're part of a team and we all win together.
And, I definitely need to go back to the 10-year-old Joe, because you said something there that I just would be remiss if I didn't speak more with you about this, if you're comfortable enough. But the one thing I want to touch on the tail end there that you just talked about is I was raised with the idea that when you're bad at something, you need to learn more about it and get better at it. And I believe that you should, right? Mm-hmm. I believe that there are things that if you're really not good at something, try to improve it, right? But in the world of business, there are certain things that you're just not good at. And don't waste your time. This is what I'm getting from you too, right? And Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this as well. Like, don't waste your time on those things you're not good at, because there's somebody out there who's good at it.
Right.
Hire them to do that and focus on what you're really good at, and then get better at what you're really good at. Right.
So if it's a core to your business, like, if you're not good at picking up the phone to schedule new appointments, well, if that's not done, your business does not run. You do not have people to talk to. You do not get new clients. So either you do it, or you outsource it to somebody else.
Right.
So it needs to be insourced to you or outsourced to somebody better. So if I'm a 3 on a 1 to 10 scale at doing paperwork, I could try really, really hard and get up to a 5, but I can hire somebody for $20 an hour to do the paperwork, and I can go do $250 an hour or $2,000 an hour stuff by utilizing my brain and experience. So that's a better approach. Now, some things like, being able to tie your own shoes, you got to learn how to do that. Tie your own tie, stuff like that. Be able to do some of those basics to be a functional human being. But if it's the sort of thing where it is a component, but not a critical component, or is critical and is completely different mindset and skill set, hire somebody who loves to do that stuff. Let them run wild, and you do the things that generate the greater revenue. Yeah,
and I think that there is a couple little signals that you might have, you being the listener right now, that you might have that will signal you that you're not serving your purpose right now. And I'll give you a quick example of that. So yesterday, we were having a little car trouble. And what turned out that happened was the cable popped off of our battery in the car. That's all it was. And it's a 2016 vehicle, right? but for whatever reason, the fitting isn't right on the aftermarket battery. So I called up Napa. They said, put a little foil around it, kind of odd fix, right? But do that, right? So I'm doing that. While I'm doing that, I'm talking on the phone with my wife on my ear pods. One of my ear pods fall in. I'm searching for it in the engine now, and I can't find it. And I drive out to my mechanic and I say, hey, could you throw it up on the lift, see if you could find it for me? He wasn't able to do that. But now I've spent about an hour or more looking for this ear pod in the engine. I know that this ear pod's about $100. And here's the signal, is that I'm looking through the engine right now for this ear pod, and I'm realizing I'm spending an hour doing this, when meanwhile, I know that I have 5 other things on my plate that I need to get done today that are much more crucial than this $100 ear pod. So forget about the ear pod for a second. Let's just think about our time as $100 an hour. In that moment, I realized my hour is worth more than $100. And it's not because I'm getting paid more than $100 an hour. That's not the point. The point is that looking for this ear pod is not meeting what you just said.
It's taking away from you building the business also. And people focus on the hourly rate. But what about the enterprise value, that time that is lost in terms of building your empire?
That's exactly right.
That is critical. So I value my free time at $20 an hour. All right. So if I can hire somebody to do something for $20 an hour or less, you know what? I'm going to be doing that. So, hey, kid of mine, here's $10 to go, like, do this stuff for me.
Which kid is that gets the $20? I want to know. Is it Colin?
Typically it's Liam. It's Liam, my middle one.
All right, Colin, you got to step up your game.
Well, Colin's also only 11, and Colin's got,
I'm just joking around with them.
You know what? I bust on my kids all the time. As I tell them, I don't have a favorite. I hate them all equally.
No.
And I learned that from my mom, and we had 6 of us, so she had a lot to go around. But I mean, so like there was something where in the house we were having an issue with the plumbing, and my wife wanted me to try and fix it. And I spent an hour or two. I'm like, this is going to be a 20-hour job. Okay. So at $20 an hour at free time, that's $400. I was able to hire Roto-Rooter to come on in and take care of it for $150, and I didn't smell like crap and have
whatever
all this other stuff.
Right.
So it's those sort of things. If you can outsource something for a quarter of what you can make per hour, as an entrepreneur, you got to do that so that it frees time up. I've got a friend whose company, and he's like, on the phone dealing with stuff, and it's $10 an hour work, and it's like, dude, you're the entrepreneur. You've had this company for 25 years. You should be doing $500 an hour work, not trying to get a $10 sale.
Right.
And yeah, you can do that occasionally if nobody else is around. But when it's happening repeatedly, you are impeding your growth. And what does that do? That hurts everybody in your organization because they're not growing as much as they potentially could. And this is an individual who has a very strong desire to serve in his community. So it's taking away his ability to go help other people beyond the organization. So that's one of the reasons why being an entrepreneur is so awesome in a lot of ways, is we can build something that then serves our communities by giving us time to be able to go on out. And so I can be the Cub Scout pack master or work with Boy Scouts or work with Autism Society because I have the time, because earlier on I sacrificed and worked at 5 a.m. and at 11 o'clock at night and took all the time to do that then, so that now I have time with my kids or with my community.
And it's like you said, I mean, the real gist out of all this whole thing is focusing on the work that's the most impactful to build your empire. I really like that you said that. I want to go back to this because you just described a couple minutes ago pretty much an outer body experience. You described yourself seeing your body and everything. And this is outside of talking about entrepreneurship or business or anything. This is really just talking about just life, right? And these things in life that happen to us let us see the big picture as to what are we really doing here? What's our purpose, right? And if it's just for money, then obviously we don't see the big picture. And so you saw the big picture in that moment. And if you could just share a little bit more about that outer body experience. And I mean, you're saying you were dead, right? And so you saw the light and you saw everything. Could you share a little bit more on that with us about what that experience was and how it felt?
Well, it was weird. Right. Very weird, because I mean, you're floating, and so I don't know if you've ever been scuba diving, but that feeling of floating that you get where you're truly weightless. So I had that, not knowing.
And you remember it like it was yesterday.
I remember part of the feelings. I remember looking down, because one of the things is when we have traumatic or highly emotional events, whether positive or negative, that gets encoded in the brain. That's about as emotional as you can get at that point.
I have some too, yeah.
So, I mean, and those allow us to be able to build from them. And Dombrowski, the Polish psychologist, talked about how traumatic events can either make us better or break us. And so he explored people who were growing up in the ghettos, the Warsaw ghettos, people in concentration camps, and analyzed this. And so these things create the future from us. And it's how are we going to react to it? Is it a negative thing where we're broken, we're experiencing PTSD for the entire rest of our life, or is it forced growth from it? And so that is one of the things that carries us forward in a lot of ways, is how we choose to react to our experiences. And each experience that we have lays the groundwork for the future. So if we can give ourselves difficulties on purpose, like going and running in the rain. I hate running in the rain. In fact, a couple of months ago, a storm was coming on in and it was getting cold. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go out and run in this. And it's going to suck. Absolutely. But I'm going to be better for it. And it did suck. It was horrible, sloggy shoes and, rain coming down and it was cold and nasty. But when I took that shower afterwards, I was so much better for it. And I have more resilience because of that. And that allows me to be able to do some of these ultra marathons and some other crazy things. You were talking about your dyslexia a while ago. And Malcolm Gladwell talks about desired difficulties. So other people who have dyslexia, David Boies, the attorney, he learned that, he can't learn by reading, but he can hear and memorize. And so that became an incredible strength for him because he understood, he had the metacognitive awareness, as we talk about, of this is how I am. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. So how do I turn it to my advantage?
It's so funny because so the advice I received was I was listening to watching YouTube videos. Gary V was talking about what we just talked about earlier, which was focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. And at the time, I was trying to improve reading for myself because I always struggled with reading. It took me forever to read a page on a book, and then I'd read it, get to the next page, and forget everything I just read on the first page, and have to go back and reread it. So I would never finish books. And if you met me 2-3 years ago, I would tell you that I don't read, and I don't read any books. And then when I heard that statement from Gary V about focusing on my strengths, I was like, well, I listen to a lot of YouTube videos. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Why don't I do audiobooks? And last year was when I opened up my Audible account.
Yep. And how many books did you consume last year?
I'm well over 20 books. And I listened to all of them.
That puts you in the top 5% of Americans in terms of the amount of books you're consuming. And I use the term consume because I don't care if you're reading it like I do this. Audiobooks, I consume a ton of them.
Right.
Watching the videos. So I don't care what media you are taking it in.
Right.
Do whatever works for
it
you.
Takes. Yes. Yeah, it's so true. And then what ended up happening, though, is by listening to these books and focusing on that strength, I actually got better at writing, which got me back into writing my book because now I'm listening to how books are being written and now it's helping me with my writing skills. So it's just been, I'm so happy that you brought that up on that individual you said who started listening to books. So as soon as you said that, my face lit up because I was like, yes, that only reinforces the fact that, when you have a disability and we all have them. And that's why I wanted to make sure that we touch on the ADHD is that we all have disabilities. Everybody listening, everybody out there, everybody in business, anybody that who's successful has overcome a challenge and a disability. And so you're not alone. And that should be comforting to some extent. And I think the key is, and what you're talking about, and in your book you talk about this, is it's creating these habits in order to overcome these disabilities. And going back to your story of being 10 years old and experiencing this out-of-body experience and making that decision to say, this is not going to be a traumatic negative, this is going to be a trauma positive. Yep. And looking back at it and going, I got my rest of my life to live. I think that that's a really great way to look at it.
So it's sort of like Deadpool when he's, like Dr. Kilbrew is putting him through the paces and torturing him and it kicks off his mutant gene so that he can heal. That's sort of what that event was for me. But I don't have the Ryan Reynolds look or voice, unfortunately.
But it's really important that sometimes as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, we look back at those experiences. And I think what's a learning in here for anybody listening is that you could have had that trauma and maybe it affected you negatively. But if you can go back now and look at it through this new lens, this lens that, Joe, you're sharing of, I got the rest of my life ahead of me. I just experienced the worst thing in the world, death, right? There's nothing worse.
Yeah,
there's nothing, that's it. That's it, right? And I can look back at that and go, I got the rest of my life now. That's 10 years old. Now you got another 100 to go, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it really is a way to look at it. It helps me sometimes with some of the things that I'm experiencing in terms of starting my business and some of the anxieties I experience. I had a situation, I had a ski accident. And in a ski accident, I was flying down a diamond and it was an icy day out and there was flags all over the mountain, and I'm a Northeast skier, so ice doesn't bother me and flags don't, if it's for ice, whatever, right? But I had a choice to make. And it's funny because you think about it, right? Any decision that you don't make is a decision that you make, right? It's a decision is a decision. But I made this decision, right? So I had a flag to my right, I had a flag to my left. To the right was kind of more of the center of the mountain, but there was a family on there that should not have been there. They didn't know what they were doing, so I would have plowed them. Oh. And to the left was kind of like off the side track of the mountain. So I chose to go left. I was like, all right.
So you took the risk to protect somebody else.
I guess, yeah, looking at it that way, thank you for that. That's nice. So I took it, and unfortunately that flag to the left was more because of an exposed pipeline. And so that clipped my shins, and I was flying, so that hit my shins, and I just ended up doing a spins in the air, just flying through the air, to the point where there was a mid-lift, mid-mountain chairlift that my brother was actually on. And he said that people around him thought I was practicing for the X Games. They said, look at that guy, he's doing the X Games, because that's how high I was flying. But what's interesting is just like you in that outer body experience, I remember that moment in the air. I remember that air time. I remember exactly what I was thinking. And the only thought that crossed my mind was, I'll be lucky if I survive this. That's exactly what I thought. And then I landed, dislocated my shoulder, everything, my whole shoulder's gone and everything. But I lived. And I look back at that just similarly to you, of whenever I experience anything, I'm like, wait a second. I almost died in my 20s, right?
Yeah.
I almost died through a ski accident. I didn't, right? It was just a shoulder injury, but it could have been worse.
Yeah, you were this close,
right?
This close.
To anything. Right? People have died for just falling down in their home, right? What? So I think it's the way you look at things, that perception is so important. You have a great perception, and there's a couple things that you've done in your life, and you've already mentioned them, and they are being a champion in martial arts. You've also, you're an advisor now for, I'd like you to kind of speak more about this. Today, 4 Under 40 winner.
So Advisor Today magazine is the magazine for NAFA, the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. And for about 15 years now, they've given out the award, the 4 Under 40. So basically, I was chosen as one of the most impactful and interesting individuals under 40 in all of financial services in the United States.
Wow.
That was sort of cool. Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And that's really cool. But then the one that really stood out to me was when you and I were trying to schedule this and you said, oh, I'm sorry, man, I can't do it. I just ran an ultra marathon. So you've done 2 full marathons, 15 Ragnars, which I would like you to identify for us, and then 2 ultra marathons. So
and actually, I was planning on doing another ultra marathon today that I got into, but I'm like, oh, I can't do it because I'm coming down to see Mike. So and if it weren't for you, I'd be doing the hamster wheel right now, running around doing 100 miles.
But these accomplishments, to me, it's more than just, and for you too, it's more than just a badge of courage, right? It's really this determination and this grit that you have of you set your mind to something and you must achieve it and you do it. And I'd like you to speak a little bit as we kind of we've been going for a little bit now, but this mindset that you have, like we've just talked about it, right? We've kind of set the groundwork for this mindset. And if you could maybe elaborate on it and maybe share with our audience how they can maybe develop this mindset. So we can look at habits, we can look at building a structure around yourself, we can look at looking at a traumatic situation, turning it into a positive and saying, I have the life ahead of me. But as we conclude this episode here, what are some other things that we can do to get this grit that you have?
So David Goggins has been really good influence on me. And, he talks about, turning on Goggins. That's when Templin comes on out, is a similar thing. But you push yourself past these dark places. You choose to challenge yourself. And I probably shouldn't have listened to his discussion about his first ultra marathon right before I did mine, because his was pretty horrible. But so pushing yourself to these absolute limits beyond the breaking point, where literally you are running on fumes and emotions. And I had stuff happen during my first ultra marathon that actually took away all my emotional strength, because somebody else needed my strength at that point. So here I am, I'm 45 miles into doing a double marathon, 52 plus, and my friend needed me. So here I am staggering, and
An ultra marathon is how many miles?
Ultra marathons are technically anything beyond a marathon, so anything beyond 26. So I swore that I would never do another marathon after my second one. So I did 2 in one day, because 2 negatives make a positive in my mind. And you got to remember, I'm Irish, so I'm too thick-headed to give up.
And what's a Ragnar?
So a Ragnar is a roughly 200-mile team relay race.
Wow.
So you have 12 people, and you run, and then you hand off to somebody, and they hand off to somebody, and you have 6 people in a van, and then you sleep on a floor someplace or in the van or whatever while the other van runs, and you just go and you do this entire 200 plus miles. And my team that I hooked up with, the Road Hazards, I've done 15 of them at this point with these.
It's got to be a lot of fun with a team.
Oh, you get Stockholm syndrome, and you get all sorts of weirdness, and then you get Ragnover a couple of days later, where you get the depression, because it's like, oh, geez, I just did this, and what's my next big thing?
And so let's go back to this ultra marathon, because I think that speaks a lot to your character. And when we talk about grit, right, what is that, right? What it is, it's I'm not going to let myself down, but I'm not going to let others down. And
Exactly.
so I think this example that you're sharing with us, a story about you and this ultra marathon and helping this friend out, speaks to that.
Right. And so, you push yourself so that you can be better when the time comes. As Jordan Peterson talks about, your goal is to, when your father dies, not be a miserable, sniveling mess, but be the strongest person in the room to help everybody else that needs it. And so challenging ourselves and pushing ourselves is for the great adventure of life. And some days we sprint, some days we have trouble getting off the couch, but some days you can go and do 100 kilometers and be champion of the world, because you have slowly built up to that. And 7 years ago, I was not a runner in any way, shape, or form. I hate running.
Wow.
I hate running, by the way.
Wow.
I do it because I hate it, and it makes me better. And also because I can eat whatever I want afterwards, and I like to eat. But I do it so that it makes me better, so that I have the reserves to be able to build my business, to help my family, to be there for my friends, to help others, to make the best possible Joe. And this is one particular metric. I don't care if you're going to do martial arts. I don't care if you're going to be learning how to play the guitar like my 14-year-old is. Whatever you're doing, start challenging yourself regularly so that you can make progress. And that is going to develop grit and resiliency that will help you in all your other endeavors.
Yeah.
Skill set and will set. The will set comes from challenging yourself in whatever way, so that you can then take that concept, that ability, and apply it in other arenas.
And now I need to hear the story, though. So what happened with your friend? So he was struggling through the race.
It's a she, and
she was struggling.
No, she wasn't doing this race at all. She was having other issues going on, and so she was texting me while I was finishing this, and my battery's running low.
Wait, you're running a race and you're texting people?
Yeah. During my first marathon, I drank coffee the first half and beer the last half. My buddy,
oh my goodness. I've done 2 half marathons. And 2 half marathons. And I'm very much like you. I play basketball. I love running in basketball. I'll run up and down the court 100 times. It doesn't bother me one bit. But to run a marathon, generally speaking, not something I enjoy as much. And I would never think of looking at my phone and texting during a marathon.
But you
are a true multitasker, is what it is.
Yeah, and also
you're lucky you didn't find a pole while you were running and texting.
I had a buddy do that, ran right up, bang.
But she needed you, and you were there for her.
So your friend needs you. We need to be there. That's what friendship is. That's what love for another is. And so having the capacity to give your emotional strength to somebody when they need it, even if you need it at that point too. You know what? I didn't die. So, I was able to be there for that person when they need it. And that's all that matters in the end. And because of that, I now have much more strength. So I did my first ultra marathon in April. That was a double marathon, so 52-ish and a half miles. And then early October, I did 100 kilometers, so 62 plus. So I ended up going additional 10 miles. I was able to do it in 2 hours less. And when I finished, I was able to run the next day. In fact, we had the autism run the next day, and I dressed up like a duck in costume and danced around for 3 hours. So I was able to do that because of how I pushed myself and was able to give to others when they needed it. And ultimately, that is the goal of building a business and building a human being, so we can do that.
Right. And in that story right there, I mean, it's everything you just talked about and just kind of encapsulating it is just that in that moment, that story right there of you didn't give up on your goal either. Your goal was to run the ultra marathon. And it would be so simple for anybody else to say, hey, look, my friend really needs me. I got to bail on this, right? I don't like running anyway. And you didn't. And I think that we can translate that into the entrepreneurial journey, is that in the entrepreneurial journey, and even in the corporate journey, right? In his business leader journey, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. And you're going to be trying to accomplish things while other people need your energy and your attention. And it's very easy to say to your boss or to your colleagues or whoever it is and say, hey, look, you know what? I'd really like to help you today or do this today, but I can't because
I've got a sick kid or my mom's got cancer or I got to do this.
Right.
You know what? We find a way.
Find a way. Yeah. I think that's such a great story that really brings that all together. And that's what I love about this show is that I think that we can tie in, and in your book too, it's like you're tying in tips, you're tying in quotes and things that we all hear, but then we tie it into a story that's real, a real story. And in your book, you do that a lot too. You have these quotes. Which, by the way, another thing that we share in common, I did a basketball, I used to run a basketball league. I still would be running it if it wasn't for, unfortunately, the situation that we're in right now with COVID, and schools don't let us run our men's league in their facilities right now, so it's not active at this time. But when I ran it, I would write a blog for it. And the way that I started every single blog was I would look for a quote from an athlete, and it would kind of be a quote that talked about the night. Like if I saw like one of the older guys, he scored 6 points one night, right, in one of the games. And I had to highlight him, right, because this guy's in his late 60s and he's playing with this men's league is anywhere from 30 plus. That's the men's league, right?
And he was on the plus side.
He's on the plus side. And there's not too many guys on the plus side. And there's not too many guys on the plus side that could score 6 points in a game. It's not a lot of points. But if you're in your 60s and you're only playing for about 5 minutes, that's a lot of points.
Hey, he scored over a point per minute. That's awesome.
So I found this great quote that you probably know as a runner, which is, you don't stop running because you get old. You get old because you stop running. And it's been used in many other sports of you don't stop playing basketball because you got old. You get old because you stop playing basketball. And so that was my quote. And I remember one of the young guys came up to me afterwards at the following week and he said, hey, so I only have to score 6 points to make it to your blog? And I said, yeah. I said, exactly. I said, when you're 68 years old and you score 6 points, you make it in my blog. We're a little bit off topic here.
Okay. This is awesome.
But to your book, I mean, that's exactly it. It's tying those stories together with those quotes, which I really love. So as we kind of wrap up here, we
can't go for another hour?
Oh,
I'm having fun.
You and I could certainly go for another hour. And I keep saying as we wrap up, I'm just trying to respect your time. But you know what I'd like to kind of break down here are some of your habits, because you study habits. And so you're very mindful, from what I perceive of you, you're very mindful about your habits. They don't just happen. You don't just drink a glass of water at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because it's in front of you.
Right.
It's in front of you because you put it there for a reason. Not that that's exactly what you do, but I'm just.
No, but there's 2 glasses of water on my table in my bedroom so that I can drink them throughout the night and in the morning.
So I would like to go through your habits. You speak about a book that actually, again, Matt has my coach sent me, and I have yet to read it, but I have it. It's next to my list. Once I finish up Truck Full of Money by the kayak founder Paul English, Atomic Habits is next on my list. So it's so funny you just brought it up today. So in Atomic Habits, we talk about habit stacking.
Yes.
Which I would like you to help break down a little bit about what habit stacking is, and then share it in your own words of what you're doing in terms of that.
So we've heard that habits take 7 days to establish, or 21 days, or 66. And really, if you look deeper than that, the reason why it takes a different amount of times to establish different habits is because of the structure around them. So I'm going to assume that people get up in the morning, right? We all get out of bed.
Right.
So that is the first step, the first of your habits for the day. Every day you get out of bed. So you can either try and take a habit and build it in the air and say, I'm going to work out sometime in the afternoon or later in the day or whatever, or you can stack it against this. I do action X, which leads naturally to action Y. So I get up and I sit down and I read my daily Stoic. Okay. So even if I'm at a race, I take screenshots of those days' daily Stoics. So I get up and I can still read it. So I have the tool in place to make sure I always can succeed with that. But I get up, I read my daily Stoic, and then I work out. Okay. And that's what I do every single day. My physiotherapist is like, I want you to start doing this to help improve your shoulder stuff. So I added those shoulder exercises into that workout because I'm already doing X, then Y, then Z. So if I want to add something else in, like when I was writing the book, I would get up, I would read my daily Stoic and have my cup of coffee. I would go do the workout, including my 100 punches per hand and my shoulder workouts. And then I would sit down and I would write. So I added that habit on. So that's habit stacking. And so if you want to do your phoning as an entrepreneur, you have to call 50 people a day. Guess what? You run your phoning lists. You walk into the office, you grab your cup of coffee, you turn your computer on, and you sit down and you phone. You don't say, I'll get to it when I get to it or whatever. You build a habit. So A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. So if you structure it like that, it will only take you 1 week to develop that habit instead of taking weeks or months or never establishing the habit, which is why young financial advisors always fail, because they're not consistently asking for introductions or they're not consistently phoning, or a combination of the two. Seriously, that is why 90% of them fail, is those two reasons. So if you build habits and structures around it so that you never have to violate it or think about it, you just do it. So like, for example, having an agenda in every single meeting, and on your agenda it says brainstorm for favorable introductions, and you have a list to feed people. You know what? So you do your meeting with them, you're going along your agenda, oh, brainstorm for favorable introductions, here's your list, boom, and you do it religiously. So if you do that and you have your phoning being the first thing that you do when you walk into the office every morning, you get your cup of coffee, you sit down, your phone, boom, you're going to succeed.
Right.
Because you've built the environment and you're getting out of bed every morning, as we said, roll into the next habit, the next habit, the next habit. And I do this because I have to be ultra disciplined with my ADHD and everything else going on. But I do this, and then within each one of those steps, I have total freedom. And guess what? It gets to noon, I've accomplished everything that I'm supposed to for the day. Woohoo! I'm in the bonus round. I can keep working. I can go spend time with the kids. I can do whatever I want. But, you know, when you're in the bonus round, then you're operating in flow. So you use your habits to have success. So that's one of the ways. You know, you get up from the table from having dinner. Instead of leaving your plate there, you go over and you wash it. Okay. You get out of bed in the morning, you make your bed like Admiral McCracken talks about. Okay. These little things. A leads to B, and A can lead to B in a bad way. So what you do is you eliminate A if you're trying to crack a habit. Like if you always smoke with somebody, don't hang out with them. Okay. Or if you always play on a certain app, or, you know, you're doing stuff that you shouldn't do, you'll eliminate the trigger for it, and it helps eliminate the habit. But if you want to build good things, then you just stack them on top of each other. So it leads to the next one, the next one, the next one, and all of a sudden you're having success.
So there's a few things that you said in there that I think we can just kind of elaborate a little bit on. I'll touch on 3 of them. And if you could remind me of this person's first name, I can't think of it, of Keller from Keller Williams, the founder of Keller Williams.
I don't know their name, so I can't remind you.
I'm going to be misspeaking probably, and anybody out there can correct me if they want, but I'm going to call him Robert Keller. Right. I'm just going to call him.
How about Keller? We'll just call him Keller.
Mr. Keller. We'll call him Mr. Keller of Keller Williams. He talks about the one thing, right? Doing the one thing.
Like Curly in City Slickers.
Is that what he says? One thing.
Yeah.
And City Slickers, great reference, man. I remember when the deer died in the river, and then it didn't die. And my sister and I were crying. I remember that, man. It was just like yesterday. But so back to Mr. Williams here, and he writes in his book about the one thing, and doing the one thing, and what you just said too is doing the one thing first thing in the morning. Eat your frog, right?
Yep.
Do that one thing. So we could talk a little bit more about that. The other thing I think is important that we bring up here is interruptions. Is that okay? Great. So we have all of these habits, but what about when my kid interrupts me? And this is a true scenario for me, right? Like I got this,
every parent.
Right. I got this habit of writing for my book and writing for other things and doing work, whatever it is, right? A habit of riding the bike, right? But what about when the kid says, hey, look at me? And that's all it is, right?
Yep.
And you want to pay attention to them because they're so cute and you got to, right? So what do we do with interruptions? Any type of interruption. Could be in the workplace, right? Could be the boss is phoning you while you're making those calls that you said you need to make, right? So how do we deal with that? And then I think the last one, which is probably the most important one, is more about how do we prepare for these habits? Because the habits that you're speaking about, some of them take preparation. And like you said, those glasses of water don't get to your bedside if you don't go and fill them first.
Can we talk about that one first,
Sure,
actually?
any order you want, but I wanted to make sure we hit those three.
You prepare for your habits is the habit of preparing. So, every night I put those 2 glasses of water on the table so I have them at night and in the morning. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be prepared. If I did not go to bed at a certain time, I wouldn't be able to get up in a certain time. Doing your phoning that we talked about, you run your phoning lists beforehand. Talking with a potential client, you have your agenda and your feeder list. Well, you know what? That is a habit of preparing that. How do you do it? Do you allocate a half hour once a week while you're sitting on the couch drinking a beer, watching the Yankees beat the Red Sox and running those things? Or, are you doing it at the last moment? Because if you're doing it at the last moment, like most insurance agents and salespeople, it's not going to happen. But if you build the habit in, then you have the habit built in. So prepping for the habit is the habit of preparing for it. Your business day begins the night before when you go to bed.
Right.
So having these things. So for example, my running shoes and my workout gear are sitting in my room ready to go so I don't have to dig through and find the stuff. I can literally roll out of bed, make the bed, drink the water, put those things on, go over, sit down, have the half cup of coffee that I left from the night before, turn on the coffee pot, which is prepped so that it's ready to be made, sit down, read the Daily Stoic. I then read my book that particular day. I go down and I work out. And when I'm done, guess what? The coffee's ready because I planned ahead and prepared for it.
Right.
And then I can write and do the other things that need to be done. But I stack those habits because, okay, what needs to be done for the next day, you prepare it the night before so that you just execute on the habits.
May I ask, do you ever practice meditation or manifestation or hypnosis in any way?
Oh, all the time. So
because it's so similar, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what manifestation is.
So when you are going in or out of sleep, that's when your body's producing theta waves. And that's when the doors between the conscious and the subconscious are broken down the most. And you can literally program your reticular activation system and your brain the best. So the first major tournament that I won as a martial artist, I went to bed every night and woke up every single morning dreaming of how I was going to win that tournament with an instant left hook kick to the guy's head. I visualized that multiple times every single day for 6+ months. And I practiced like a madman. But ultimately, when it came down to that last moment, how did I win that tournament? Whoop! Instant left hook kick to the guy's head. Because I had visualized it over and over and over again. So manifestation, self-programming, because you got to remember, we have the hardware that we have, which is the brain, but we also have software that we program into it. Mm-hmm. So whether it's listening to affirmations, using binaural beats, I actually play stuff on the computer in the other room while I'm sleeping. That way I can increase my knowledge and my brain set. Just all these different things that you can do to help maximize your stuff. So Dr. Julie Bell wrote the book, a book. She's a sports psychologist, and one of the winner's mindset. And she talks about how there is no difference between visualization and actually doing something. Mm-hmm. And so great athletes visualize the shot over and over. They visualize sinking the putt. So they have played that hole or done the thing 1,000 times, 10,000 times beforehand. So when it comes time to actually do it, they just execute.
Right. And it works. I mean, I've used it for myself. I've visualized so many things for myself that have actually come true. I had a meeting recently, and the person I was meeting with said, "It's October." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You said we'd be meeting in October about this." And it was about the business. And I'm being cryptic intentionally because I just don't want to share certain things about this. But,
the art of the poets did not say everything.
But it was so interesting. And I said, "I did?" And she said, "Yeah, you told me that we would be discussing this in October." And I was like, man. And it was because in my mind, that's exactly what I had foreseen at the time. It was in July when we had met and talked about this item, which had to do with the insurance company that I'm doing. And this other book that came to mind when you just said this is called Mind Gym. My father-in-law gave it to me, Mind Gym. It's a short little book. It was one of the first books that I actually was able to read because it was only about like maybe 100 pages. I don't even think it's that many. But in there, it talks about a study, which I'm sure in Winner's Mindset talks about the same study about the people doing 10 free throws, right? And about like some were given no mind, like they didn't think about the free throws. They didn't practice the free throws. They obviously didn't do well in the exam. And then there was another set that did free throws only in their mind. And then there was another set that only did free throws. And the ones that did it in their mind did just as good as the ones who did free throws, right? Which is really incredible, right? I mean, it's really, really incredible. It makes me think sometimes I need to start playing a little more basketball in my head to get better on the court. But it really works, right?
It does. And so there's stories of people who were like in the gulags who played chess games in their head and went on to become world chess champions. There's a story of a individual who was in one of the North Vietnamese prisoner of war camps.
Yes.
He was a golfer. And he came on out and he took 20 strokes off of his game because he played the course over and over again in his head.
Yes.
You know, Viktor Frankl rewrote his masterpiece while in the Nazi camps and came on out and did this. So these people do this. Why the hell aren't we doing a little bit better than what we are today? It's because we're lazy.
Well, you're 100% right. The lazy part is so true because I know about this, right? I practice this, and yet sometimes at night I don't want to do it because it's
not a habit.
Well, that's probably true. You're probably calling me out 100%. But on the other end, because it's not as easy as it's painted either, right? And I think that's important for the entrepreneurs and business leaders to listen to. Is that sure, we're talking about some habits, we're talking about some great things and overcoming challenges and everything, but we also have to realize that it's not easy either. And that's why I wanted to bring up your grit, because it's not easy. It's simple, but not easy. Right. You have to have determination. You have to really want these things. And so you have to put your mindset in the place of like, I really want this.
And that comes back to the couple of things that you wanted to talk about. Keller Williams, the one thing. What is the most important thing? Is it getting the book done? Is it making $1 million round table? Is it building this business so that you can serve your community better? Whatever it is, that one thing, everything that you're doing should be aligned to it. And being able to say no to things that don't contribute to that. I get asked to do charity things or help other people out all the time, and I have to say no because it's not for the greatest good.
You opened a book with Stephen Covey, and Stephen Covey talks about that. How do you say no to things?
You say no.
Well, but because you have to have an overwhelming yes.
Because if you don't have a big enough yes, you will say yes to all the little things.
Exactly.
Warren Buffett actually had his corporate pilot, write a list of 50 things they wanted to do and then rank them. And Warren Buffett told him 1 through 10 are the most important, 11 through 50 are the most dangerous because they will take your time away from doing the truly important things. And you can be good at it, but you can't be great. You can't be world-class and phenomenal. So that is, you benchmark against it. And you basically have to choose what is in the best interest. And so that's one of the reasons why I stopped running marathons for a while, because I did not want to take the sacrifice from the other things that will have taken. Because the other things, like when my kid was first diagnosed with autism, was more important than my running marathons or things like that. And going back to the interruptions in kids, one thing that you do is you use structure. So for example, my phone's on Do Not Disturb. Because I'm not going to be disturbed because this is too important. So for people who are meeting with clients, put your phone on Do Not Disturb and put it down. And when my wife was pregnant and was about to pop and everything, I'd take my phone out, I'd put it down. I would tell the client, my wife is about to have a baby. If this phone rings, I'm actually going to check it. If it's anybody other than her or a family member saying, go to the hospital, please forgive me, but I will do it. But if it rings and it's them, I'm leaving. And I was respectful right up front with that. I'll leave my phone in the drawer in the other room. I'll put my email on Do Not Disturb. I'll put my phone on Do Not Disturb. You tell your boss, I am phoning during this time. I am not to be disturbed. In fact, I go into a different room with just the schedule and my phoning stuff and the phone to do it so there are no distractions.
No distractions. So setting up the environment around you is so important, right?
Kids know, if I'm in here, I'm doing this, okay? It has to be emergency. So did you die? You shouldn't be disturbing me. And my kids, that's an internal joke. But, set a timer so that you plow through. So you're like, I got 20 minutes to do this. So instead of dorking around for 25 minutes and then trying to get down to work, you just sit down and do for 20 minutes, and then you can do other things with the kids.
Right.
And so, especially when they're younger, they're going to cry or whatever, but you can train your kids, no, I have to do this so that we can do this. Right. If I don't finish my job, if I don't do my task, we can't do things. And you can teach them that way. You know what? You need to pick up 50 Legos, and then we'll do something.
Is that all they have is 50 Legos?
No, it's like 5,000. But
50 Legos, that's a handful.
But you need to pick up 50 Legos, and then we can have a couple of minutes to do stuff. And so it's that.
I'm glad you bring up the kids, because I'd like to transition into family and some of the extracurricular work that you do, because I think that sometimes as entrepreneurs and as business leaders, we feel that we don't have the time for the family or for the extracurricular. And you brought it up before about being a part of the Autism Society and being a Cub Scout, Boy Scout leader. And that part is also important. And again, we talk about these interruptions, and they could be with your boss, but let's just talk about family interruptions, right? As you just mentioned, family is important too, right? And family is part of this journey that we're all on.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's the reason why we're on this journey, right? I remember I sat with a manager once, and he thought it was more important that I be at the office than take my daughter who had a fever to the doctors. And I looked at him dead in the eyes and I said, hey, look, the only reason why I'm here is because I have a daughter. And it's because I'm married with kids, and, I'm making a long story short, but the point that I was making to him was like, if I don't have this family, I don't need this job, right? I can go do whatever else, right?
And here's the thing. There's how many other jobs out there?
Right.
There's millions of them. How many kids do you have?
That's it.
You can't replace them.
Right.
Okay. You can't replace your spouse, or things like that. So guess what? I'm working to take care of my family, not the other way around.
That's right.
So the boss needs to understand that. And there's some things like if you're on an assembly line, you have to be there. But as we've seen in the pandemic, there is flexibility. We don't have to necessarily be someplace to do the job. And if you need to take time off to do the job better, what's the net output? If it increases, take the time, take the flexibility, do what you need to do to ultimately be better.
Well, I mean, it goes right back to, you brought up Stephen Covey, and it's sharpening the blade, right? Yep. If you're going to run the blade till it's dull and keep running, you're running a dull blade. You got to take the time. But the where I'm really trying to go here with you is more about, I want to talk a little bit about the family life and about the Cub Scouts and being that, because we just kind of talked about doing the one thing. We talked about setting the structure and the habits and everything, right? And so because you've done all of that, you've set that structure, you've done that one thing. And I think that when you, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, set that one thing up and accomplish it, then you can give yourself grace for the rest of the day. Yeah. You can look at the rest of the day and go, hey, you know what? My kids just got home and they said they want to go to the park with me. I can actually take them to the park because I did that one thing.
So one of the things that I do is I take these business cards, and I didn't mention this, but when I sit down to write in the morning, I also look at my business day and I write down the couple of most important things that need to be done that day, where it's returning calls to these clients, where it's finishing this component for the book, whether it's running this analysis, whatever it is, those 3 to 5 most important things. And those become my most important things to do during the day. So when I roll into the office, if phoning is the most important thing, I phone. If completing an analysis or taking care of the preparation for today, which was on my list 4 days ago, because you always try and operate close to a week in advance, so you're not running out the door at the last minute. But you do those things, and I check them off, and it's a great visual, and you feel good about it. And when I've checked off everything, I throw it in the garbage, so I'm mentally cleared. And then at that point, I can look at other things that are nice to-dos as opposed to have to do's.
So about those nice to do's, right? So let's talk about the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, because
those are have to do's. Those are in my calendar. That is an appointment. Just like Taekwondo used to be an appointment for me before I had
But they're
kids.
Enjoyable is what I'm getting at.
They're enjoyable.
Yeah.
But you know what? If I don't do what I'm supposed to do in the office, I'm not allowed to go to Taekwondo. So that's why I bust my butt in the morning. It's the reward, but it's also if a client asks, can I meet with you at 7:00 on Wednesday? No, I have an appointment.
Right.
Okay. Granted, the appointment is, with my students, beating on each other, but it's still an appointment. It's just as important as that appointment sitting down with a client.
Which again goes back to some other things that were taught to us, which is you set an appointment for yourself, with yourself, and you respect that, because you got to respect yourself, right? And trust me, I'm guilty of not respecting my own appointments with myself. But I guess what I'm trying to lead into...
Let's turn around. How can we make this better for you so that you respect that?
Well, I do work on it. Yeah. So I right now am working with a business coach, Merritt Minnemeyer, and we meet weekly, and those are one of the things that we talk about. And that's one of the ways that I'm able to respect that time is what I notice with myself is that when someone's dependent upon me, I'm able to respect it a lot better than if I just make it about myself. And
like having a lifting partner or an accountability partner.
Exactly. It's an accountability partner. So that's how I've been able to make that better, right? So because in that hour that I work with Merritt on a weekly basis, we work on my business. Like I wouldn't be starting this insurance company right now if it wasn't for meeting with her on a weekly basis, because every week we meet and we talk about it. And while I had a full-time job, an intense full-time job at that, I was selling middle market insurance accounts and had to make 100 calls a day and prospect and do everything that we just talked about. Show up to the office, drive an hour to get to the office, an hour back home, a 9 to 5-er, making the calls, making the emails, doing the touches, and get sales right?
Yep.
And I still built my business during that time. And it was because I had an accountability partner. I hired a coach. We worked on the business together. So that's one of the ways. My other coach that is Matt Alfonso, where we're more on the spiritual side of the meditation and manifestation side. Same thing of the time blocking is what we do. So I time block for myself. And honestly, the question of interruption was really for me because I time block for myself, and the time blocking that I'm doing with Matt is based around the book and based around other things and the interruptions. And one of the answers he gave to me, which I'm sure you'll attest to, is what is the importance to you writing this book, right? How is it going to change your life?
Yeah, Simon Sinek's The Why. Or as Friedrich Nietzsche says, if you have a strong enough why, you will always discover your how.
Right.
Okay, if it's important enough, if I put a gun to your head and said, I'm coming back in 2 weeks, if your book's not done, I'm going to shoot you. Or better yet, I'm going to shoot your child. Guess what? That book's done.
We just turned dark. I meant insanity.
But if I did that, guess what? It's getting done.
Yes. You said something there that is also really important. And I knew we can go on forever. When I first met you outside of the studio, I was just like, oh man, all right, this guy's got the energy. They're like, this is gonna be a breeze. But I can't let this go because you just said it. If you know your why, the how will come. And it's so important because so many people get lost in the how. They go, well, then how are you going to get there? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And the truth is like, if you just know that that's what you want to do, you will figure out. Right? You'll find the ways to around my how. I know my why now, right? I know.
What's going to happen is you're going to program your reticular activation system to look for it. You're going to find the people. You're going to ask the experts. You're going to put together a plan. You're going to figure it out. You're going to do it. But if it wasn't important to you, if it wasn't as important as breathing, it wouldn't happen. But if it is that important, if it's what you think about, if it's what drives you, if it's what you obsess over, guess what? You're going to figure it out.
Yeah. And the people will come. And what's interesting about that is, so I really only started committing to writing this book about a month ago when I started with Matt. So I've been working with Merritt for well over a year now, but that's been focused on the business. And it's like you just said, focusing on things, right? So that was focused on the business. The book was an afterthought and all that. But with Matt, I was like, all right, well, I'm taking on this new coach and it's more on the spiritual side. Let me bring up my book to him, right? So I brought up my book and he honed in on it. He was just like, wait a second, what's this book thing you want to do, right? And what's interesting is what you just said is we started focusing on the why is it important. And at the time, I couldn't figure out what I was going to write about. I couldn't figure out why I was writing this book, right? I didn't know any of this, right? So that was part of the reason why I didn't start writing.
Right.
But when he started saying to me, well, why is it important? And I said, well, because I want to share with people my entrepreneurial journey. All right, why is that important? Well, because I got all these stories that lead into this journey for me. It was like, wait a second, that's what I'm going to write about, is I'm going to talk about these stories. I have all of these stories in my mind, right? Put them on paper and relate them to the entrepreneurial journey. And so we start working on this together, right? And then now, today, meeting with you, so you contact, you were so we're kind of circling back. You were the first that contacted me about this show, about coming onto the show. And this is months ago. At the time, you probably had your book ready to go, right?
No, I was still writing.
You were still writing? But at the time, I was in no place about my book at the time when I started this show. But then you had to reschedule, and we finally worked it out to where we're meeting today. And today, I'm in a place where I can actually understand what you're going through with this, and you are a resource to me because I'm writing my book, right? So it's and you know this from an old Chinese proverb, which is, when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. Huh? And that's how I feel in this moment, is that I've been talking about it, I've been writing, and then here you are booking with me, and you're going, hey, I just came from a book signing, I got my book here. You plop it down in front of me, I'm like, holy crap, look at this. And then one other thing, and I'd like you to share a little bit more on your thoughts on what I've just shared so far at this portion, was I brought this up in my Toastmasters meeting, and there's a professor in my Toastmasters meeting, and she shows up randomly because it doesn't coincide with her schedule, but she showed up to this meeting. She's a professor at the Culinary Institute. And her name's Nilsa. She's a wonderful, wonderful person, just a wealth of knowledge. And she said, hey, Michael, did you realize that November is something writing month? You know it?
Yeah, it's nonfiction writing month.
Right. And there's a whole bunch of resources out there this month to help people who want to write. And I was like, holy crap. So she sent me the website and everything. And it's like, when you start putting it out there, the hows will start coming to you.
So I'm going to put this out there for you to be a resource. I'm going to help you finish this. So I am making this offer. I will be your accountability partner in some ways. You tell me when you're going to have a chapter for me to read. I'll review it. I'll bounce ideas around for you. Tell me when you're thinking that, I want to have a rough draft by X point. And I will help you be accountable for it and be your biggest supporter and the biggest pain in your ass at the same time around it, because it's that dynamic that you need. Champions want to be coached. Okay. Right. The higher the standard, the harder the coaching around it, the tough love for it. If you don't want to succeed, you know what? Okay, show up, don't even keep score. But if you want to be the best, you have to have the toughest people around you. Michael Jordan beat the crap out of the people on his own team so that they could win championships. And that was the standard that was imposed. So having these tough standards, this accountability, the person who's going to drive you, the Bird and Magic Johnson driving each other to greatness, that is one of the things that for the right person can unlock that potential. Now, people are different. And so very few people are as driven as I am, so that tough love might not be what you need. But you tell me what you need, and I will help provide it so that you get this done, because I want to read this book.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you so much. And I think what you just said there is 100% true, is that, again, entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs, the business leaders, they have the structure around them in the corporate world of the management system and everything. And if they want to lean on it, they can lean on it. But entrepreneurs a lot of times feel alone. And a lot of times that's why they fail. Yep. And I realized that too, because I've tried the entrepreneurial journey so many times and then went back to corporate because I was just like, oh, I can't do this. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. I didn't have the people around me. I didn't have the accountability partners like you talk about. And like you said, sometimes you need tough love. Sometimes you just need positive reinforcement, whatever it is. But the point is that you need people around you. I realize that with somebody else who's trying out as an entrepreneur right now. And I see this person struggling, the struggle that I went through of like, I don't know, I can't, I don't have time. Everything's a whirlwind to this person. And I'm like, you need a coach. You need somebody to help you. You can't do it alone. Very few can.
Right.
There are anomalies.
Yeah, they're freaks.
They do it alone. But you talked about Michael Jordan, right? In The Last Dance, and you see that, right? And Michael Jordan, you had Phil Jackson, right? And some coaches will refer to Michael Jordan and say, look, Michael Jordan had a coach. He did. But he's one of those anomalies. And unless you're like this, where Michael Jordan always had to create a challenge for himself. If it was the famous story about one of the coaches on the Seattle, I can't remember his name, the coach of the Seattle Supersonics in the '96 NBA Finals, who said to who snubbed Michael Jordan at a restaurant one night, and Michael Jordan said that's all he needed to go out and beat the Supersonics.
Michael Jordan, in his Hall of Fame speech, called out the guy who made his high school junior varsity team instead of him.
Right.
He invited him to the Hall of Fame speech
yes.
because it was still driving him. And that might be, beyond a certain level.
Right.
But you know what?
Well, it is.
Michael Jordan is potentially the greatest of all time because of that. Tom Brady, being picked in the 6th round. That chip is still on his shoulder today.
Right. And so that's the anomaly.
Right.
But for those who are just regular citizens of this world, we need accountability partners. We need coaches. We need people to help us. So I'm so happy that you brought that. First of all, I'm so I really am so appreciative of you offering this to me, because that's what I need, right? I need that help. And I think it's so important for entrepreneurs to hear that we need help. You got to reach out to coaches. I have 2 coaches right now, right? They're helping me in different ways. And I just experienced a hypnotherapy, and it was amazing. It was just an amazing moment. And so we all need that. So I'm so happy that you brought that up. We never got to get into the intro machine. So I'd like to just give you the time, if you want to just share with everyone what the intro machine is, your business, right? Your actual business, right?
Oh. Well, the intro machine basically is everything that we talked about today, but applied specifically around financial advisors. The goal of the intro machine is to teach people the skill set and will set that they need to be successful financial advisors. So it is everything from the pirate model of how do you handle objections, which we could talk about at some other point, to I've got this pirate fascination, which everyone knows about, to how do you build your resilience? How do you challenge yourself? How do you make yourself better? How do you learn? How do you practice? And then, not just how do you practice, but what skills are you practicing, the language around it and all that. So that's the skill set component. But the will set, which Everyday Excellence is addressing in a lot of ways, is how do you make yourself better? How do you, when you're standing at Wimp Junction, be able to go towards the scream as opposed to away? How do you make the more difficult choice? How do you choose the right way as opposed to the easy way? How do you make yourself better so that you can make your clients better and your world better? And so the book is a more fundamental and broader component of this, because instead of just focusing on financial advisors or people who are selling their talent in a lot of ways, and that's what the intro machine is designed to do, to build an introduction-based business around selling yourself. But Everyday Excellence is the bedrock that's built off of how do you become the best possible you that you can be? Because if you're the best possible you that you can be, guess what? You're going to do a lot of business.
That's awesome. I mean, and I know that you and I can go on for another hour. We're already an hour and a half in. Thank you so much for sticking with us, all of our listeners. And I think that you've just shared so many tips, so many strategies about being the best you that you can be. I think that we can keep going, right? There's so many different ways to look at it, so many other analogies, so many more quotes. But I think that anybody who's listening to this episode and just is somebody who's into self-development, this episode is a great resource. But in this, I think if you listen back to it, as you said, right, listen back to it with you're not the same person in the same river. There's so many little books that you just mentioned in here that are so important that even if you just read a quote from these books, you're going to learn so much. So I'm just thrilled that you were able to come in today and share all of this with us.
This was awesome. Let's do it again.
I can imagine that we will. Could you just share with anybody, if they'd like to get in touch with you, maybe your handles, emails, best ways to contact you?
So I'm on Twitter now as EDE with Joe.
EDE with Joe?
Yep. Okay. So that's Everyday Excellence with Joe. And so I tweet out stuff on the book. You can go to theintromachine.com, or you can go to everyday-excellence.com. There's contact us on both of those. And for your listeners, I actually put on the Everyday Excellence website, if they use the code Esposito at checkout, they get a discount And we will also peel off a little bit of the revenue, and we'll make a contribution to your charity that you care about so much, of people in Haiti.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that's really cool. I really, really appreciate that. So that's everydayexcellence.com.
Everyday-excellence.
Everyday-excellence.com. And you can pick up the Everyday Excellence book, A Daily Guide to Growing, by Joseph Templin, Joseph R.R. Templin.
Yep.
Is it Robert? No. What is it?
It's rock and roll.
Oh, is it rock and roll?
No.
What is
It's Royal Ribley, which are family names. But yes, I do have the same initials as J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the reason why the one company is called JRRT One Ring.
Nice. Very cool. So you could pick up this book. What I really like about this book, and I shared with all of you already, that I'm dyslexic and reading is a challenge for me, is that this is a book that's over 400 pages. However, you take it one day at a time, just like we talked about with our habits. We talked about the one thing, right? One day at a time, one page at a time, and by the end of the year, you'll be closer to finish, right? Because it's 400 pages. Right. So maybe read a page and a half or something.
Well, each day is between a half a page and a page and a half.
Okay.
So you read that particular day's, do the action item, and you will improve that day a little bit. And at the end of the year, you'll be like, wow, this was not too bad. I'm better.
I can't wait to jump into it. It's going to be exciting. So you go to everyday-excellence.com, enter discount code Esposito, and Joe just shared with us today, and I'm very appreciative of this, that you would make a donation to Forgotten Children of Haiti, which is obviously a charity near and dear to my heart. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Joe, it's been so awesome having you in.
This was cool.
Yeah, this was, it's doesn't even need to be said. It's an hour and a half. So we know this was fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast.